Good evening. Welcome to the board meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education. Ms. Chair Patricia Mariano is not able to be with us today, so I have been designated as the chair for tonight. Would you please stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
Allegiance to the flag,
United States of America,
States of America,
and to the republic
which stands
nation.
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Chair, we have public participation.
First item on the agenda is public comments, and we have Mr. H. Malley.
Humayun Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. In this great season of joy and celebration, we celebrate success of Lawrence Public School. Lawrence Public School, with the impeccable leadership by Honorable Superintendent Ralph Guerra, moving forward. We are proud to support our teachers' union. We must know building multi-million-dollar school does not make Lawrence Public School great. Lawrence Public School is great because of our #1 teachers, because of the hard-working paraprofessional and cafeteria workers. We must offer the best compensation for Lawrence Public School and our teachers. This nation, greatest nation in the world, when the teachers go on a strike, the whole nation goes on a strike. We, the Laurentians, are proud to be the best example of support of teachers' union. In this great season of joy, we must improve parental and community involvement. Lawrence always strong. Lawrence always unite. We, the Laurentian, means the one who support the teachers' union. Lawrence teachers, we wish the best holiday season for you. Hope the best Christmas vacation for all Lawrence Public School employees. Thank you for excellent job. We are proud to support your union.
Thank you. That concludes public participation. Maria, would you please call attendance?
Dr. Dolores Calaf.
Present.
Edgar de Leon. Arlene Garcia. Juana Matias.
Present.
Maria Muller, Chair Maria Muller.
Present.
Mayor Brian de Peña.
Present.
Next item on the agenda is the chair's report, and we have subcommittee reports today. We have Carlos Matos presenting the policy subcommittee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to report that we did not have a quorum for the policy subcommittee meeting, so we do not have an official report from the subcommittee meeting. But I would say that we received the initial first draft of comparison of the model policies from MASC, and they are currently blending their model with our policies that we have given them. Both we gave them the written policies that we have in the book form, as well as some of the policies that are on web form. But we did have a discussion with them to prep as to what the next steps are, and what they're suggesting is, or what we have really outlined as a method going forward, is to take first the legally required types of policies that are mandated by the state, really analyzing those, comparing that to what we have in terms of the language, and picking and choosing which of the two languages between their model and what we currently have, and choosing which of the ones that we prefer to have in our policies. And then going on to the next level, which is the best practice policies that they have seen across districts. And then the third level would be specific policies that we have that are only for us in terms of the types of things that we that's unique to the Lawrence Public Schools. An example of this, for example, is we are now going potentially into the hybrid system, so that might require different types of policies around that in terms of the organizational structure, management, or other kinds of things along those lines. So that might be something that we look into, as well as really doing a survey around the managers for the types of informal type of practices that may be a good idea to incorporate into policies, as well as extracting some of the practices that we have currently in our policy manuals and removing them because they're not quite policies. So those are the types of things that we will be discussing in our next subcommittee meeting with the policy committee, and seeing how they would like to proceed, whether they want us as a staff to go through and kind of edit first, or that they want to go line by line along with us in a work group type format. But that's something that the policy subcommittee, once we have a quorum, will decide. Mayor, if you had any questions?
Madam Chair, you mentioned MAC.
MASC.
Yes, for the audience.
Sorry,
that's not-
Massachusetts Association of School Committees.
Which
They are
are-
our consultant guiding us with regards to the development of these policies, and their process is to take what they have established as model policies and then take what we have in terms of our existing policies, whatever state they may be in, and then kind of melding the two in terms of comparison. And like I said, we're going through the three levels of that, which is the legally mandated, the best practices, and things that are specific to the Lawrence Public School systems.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next report is from the Subcommittee on Budget and Finance, and we have Jason Cabrera here.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Just like the policy subcommittee, we didn't have a quorum for our finance. I did have the pleasure of spending the hour talking to Ms. Matias. Very thoughtful questions. I'm feeling great about what the subcommittee, whenever we get together, where we're going to get to. Very thoughtful questions about, one, the meaningful spending on our local funds and funds from the Student Opportunity Act. And talked a little bit about what I talked about in the last meeting, which was about our facilities and capital investment and capital improvement. So those are some of the things that we'll continue to talk about. As far as at our district level, one of the things that we're doing now is meeting with our department heads and looking at budgets for our schools and making sure that the funds line up and align with what the board, the vision of the board. So that's one of the things that we're working on now, making sure that every penny is accounted for and that that is spent in a meaningful way. That is all that I have as far as that. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
And the last report is for the Curriculum and Instruction Subcommittee, and we have Dr. Jen Perry here as
I
well.
believe, or is it Dr. Jen Perry or Ms. Matias? Who's reporting on that? Or was Ms. Matias part of that?
I'm here and I have the report, but if Jen's there and she wants to report in person, I'm happy to yield the floor to her.
Smoking like a true legislator.
You got it. All right. So our subcommittee met on November 7th, and the group established our purpose for what we'll do during the course of the year. We talked about a variety of meeting topics that are scoped out over the year. The committee gave suggestions about things that they wanted to learn and discuss, and so we put together that sort of framework for the year. We also talked about professional learning opportunities that are in existence now and the partnerships that are behind those that are helping and supporting educators throughout the district to teach all of our students in Lawrence. Our meeting in December was canceled, so we'll meet again in January to talk a little bit more about our school autonomy framework, which I'll speak more about tonight. We'll also talk about our curriculum dashboard. And we just received today DESE guidance for the removal of MCAS, and so the committee wanted to learn what the guidance is from the state and how we're integrating that into the district. So those are our topics for the next meeting in January, but I think we have a good structure for the year in terms of what the committee is interested in and how to proceed. So that's the summary. Any questions about that?
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have a couple of votes. The first one would be to approve the minutes of the Lawrence Alliance for Education Board from November 18th, 2024. Did everybody get a chance to review or have any edits or questions? Okay, so I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Seconded.
Maria, please call the vote.
Dr. Dolores Calaf,
Yes.
Juana Matias,
I'm going to abstain because I was not at the meeting.
Chair Maria Muller,
Yes.
Mayor Brian De Peña,
Yes.
motion carries.
For the next vote, we have a presentation by Carlos Matos regarding contractor service for strategic planning.
If I may, as we introduce Deputy Superintendent, Madam Chair, just so that we can provide some context and clarification, especially for the audience watching us out on TV land. The presentation that Deputy Matos will make, I'm very proud of regarding the work that we've done. And it's the conversation that we're going to start about our role and what steps we're going to take to plan for exiting out of receivership. I have had plenty of conversations along with Mr. Matos, with Commissioner Russell, regarding what the plan should be. And we have been working with several contractors to look at what the best services that they can provide, considering the experiences that they have, and at this time, the conditions that we are under receivership here at Lawrence Public Schools. So welcome, Deputy.
Thank you, Superintendent. So the contract that's in front of you for the vote today is to approve ERS as the strategic plan development consultant for the Lawrence Public Schools. One of the key items that really drove us to select this organization is their experience in exactly what the superintendent just mentioned, which is guiding systems out of receivership. As you know, the school district of Holyoke Public Schools has been under receivership. This was the consultant that helped them to develop their strategic plan, and they are well on their way to coming out of receivership. And they have the expertise, as you can clearly see as they outline in the beginning page, bottom paragraph, where they indicate their experiences with the Holyoke Public School systems, and in that system, how they've been instrumental in helping to guide them outside of that receivership condition. And we are looking forward to them doing the same with us. We have been very aggressive with our ask of this consultant, as you'll see from the timeline a little further on. And we believe that the timeline we can make, and it is imperative because we are very anxious to really undertake this work. This work will be conducted by the Chief Strategy Officer of ERS, which is Dr. Angela King-Smith. And as you can tell, they have their very unique methodology that's described on page 2. And their approach to engagement is twofold. First, they'll come in and they'll do a diagnostic of what we currently have, or what I would refer to as strategic governing documents that may not necessarily fall under the specific name of strategic planning documents, but we use them to guide us and to really inform how and what we do in terms of long-term vision and long-term actions for the district. The least is not, which is the turnaround plan, which is specifically mentioned here, and we will build on very much on the work that was done there. In that diagnostic, they will take a look at the literature across the district at various levels. They're going to look at for example, the LAE board has provided a guidance in terms of for the superintendent, in terms of his evaluations. That's one level of looking at it. Then we're going to look at the leadership team. Then we're going to look at the institutions or the actual schools levels, and looking at even level of classroom practices. And we're going to fold in documents such as the work of the policy subcommittee as well in terms of the review, to make sure that we really have a cohesive picture and view of what our strategies are and nothing gets disconnected from the plan. You'll see a little bit of an outline of that level that I just described on page 3, where it talks about the superintendent level, executive level, the manager level, and the classroom level of leadership, and looking at the scans with regards to that, and looking at what it is that will inform the strategic plan and the next step of implementation. So after phase 1, if you follow along on page 4, where they go through the diagnostic assessment, they take a look and apply their systemic framework as indicated on page 2. You'll see that at that point, viewing the literature, reviewing all the types of actions that are even currently in flight, some of the plans that we're implementing now, and then we'll jump into phase 2, which is the strategic plan development, which will be informed by the various stakeholder groups that they will meet with, as well as the search of the literature. In that strategic plan, creating a shared vision, which I think is a key function that we've identified as making sure that the quality across the system, no matter where the child is in our system, is the same. And making sure that we're implementing it and we're consistent with this and we're planful, as well as applying the types of resources that help that to occur in the appropriate manner. So wherever the resources, whatever the priorities call for those types of resources is where those resources will be aligned, using this particular instrument to be able to carry out those actions, and so we can obtain the types of results similar to Holyoke, if not better, which I think will be better. If you look at page 7, you'll see the proposed timeline and budget. As I said, this is pretty aggressive. After this vote, we are going to be working between January and March on the diagnostic and analysis component of it, which will be quite full of both, like I just mentioned, the search of the literature, documenting, researching the types of documents that govern the actions and the decision-making by the system, and then as well as external and internal stakeholders that will inform the process. From there, after that is completed in approximately March, we'll go into phase 2, which is the strategic plan development itself, where we'll start actually crafting that plan for the system. And again, this is going to be a very collaborative process where we'll involve internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, but it's going to be a very fast and aggressive process that we think is what we're looking for to achieve the goals that we've outlined for the system.
If I may add, Madam Chair, Mr. Matos referenced stakeholder groups. I think it's important to note that under even though these are generalized, these groups, it will go granular. For example, at the classroom level, obviously we have a large population of ML multilingual students, and we have an effective special education program. It is important that we capture all of those groups so that they have a voice. In anticipation of delivering this contract, I have been meeting with our partnerships and various stakeholders, and each one of them that I've talked to them about joining us in strategic planning are very excited about engaging in the strategic planning. Mr. Matos mentions that this is going to be aggressive because our intent is to deliver a document to the LAE board by the June meeting in 2025 for implementation July 1st. We feel very confident with where the district is at and the work that has been done in the district, considering the fact that currently for the last 13 years, we have had a turnaround plan in place, and we've had two variations of that plan, or updated variations from the initial one. We feel very confident that the leadership team and the staff in the district have a thorough understanding of what's ahead within that turnaround plan. The turnaround plan will be used as a springboard to create this next strategic plan, and that's why we feel that a 6-month period is a doable plan instead of going out throughout an entire year. With a favorable vote today from the board, we will engage ERS officially tomorrow, and they will have boots on the ground right after the holidays, and we will start working with them at identifying those stakeholder groups and making sure that we create the audience, because this is going to be a tremendous visionary plan that should encompass the next 3 to 5 years of what we clearly believe should be happening for the delivery of educational services for our students and our families.
Ralph and Carlos, thank you so much for this. I just have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
So my first question is, and sorry that I may be misunderstanding this. We would be hiring ERS to develop a fiscal year 25 and on turnaround plan that then would be used for a strategic plan. Can you guys just clarify on that?
Yes, no, we're not updating the turnaround plan per se. This is a scan of across the board. We're going to do similar to what the work they did in Holyoke, which is take the turnaround plan and various other elements of that we're calling governance or strategic documents, incorporate that into their final document. But prior to that, there's going to be scans, internal and external, as the superintendent just mentioned, with stakeholder groups to really assess and evaluate the types of things that we're talking, that their methodology usually teases out, and that their experience in Holyoke would inform. So they would be not developing a turnaround plan, they would be developing a strategic plan based on the information that's already existed.
Once a strategic plan is approved, the strategic plan would replace
Correct.
the turnaround plan. Make sense,
And
Ms. Matias?
statutorily, that's allowable, even though we're still in receivership?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, the commissioner is looking for this.
Okay, so this would be a strategic plan for the entire school district in Lawrence to help inform everything, academics, staffing, etc.
Correct.
Okay. I have some other questions, but I'll yield the floor for some of the other members. And if they don't have questions, I'm ready to go. It just came to mind. Why ERS? Have we worked with them before?
We have not worked with them before, but they have the experience in Holyoke in doing this type of things with systems that are under receivership, which is a unique experience.
If I may, Mr. Matos, Ms. Mejia, in our research of ERS, ERS has done work on behalf of Lawrence in the beginning years when we started to go into receivership. So I do believe they worked initially with the commissioner,
Correct.
and then when he was identified, the receiver at the time, Mr. Riley, in preparing the documents for those turnaround plans. So they are familiar with the City of Lawrence's school district.
That's helpful. And then I understand that they have, they have their foot on the ground too in Holyoke, which is a gateway city. But then my next question to you all would be 6 months, you're not from Massachusetts, you don't know Lawrence, you may have been here 10 years ago. A lot of our challenges here are social, are cultural. Do they have experience? Like, this is the what we're asking them to do for 147,000 is to give us a vision of what we need to be doing for the next couple of years. And do we think they bring the social and cultural aspect of understanding who we are as a community into that?
I think that that's our role to kind of interject that throughout, and I think nobody can do that but us internally. And I think that that's what looking at the internal and the external stakeholders will provide, and they will be able to incorporate that into a strategy.
Okay, I would disagree with that. I feel like if you hire a nonprofit and the nonprofit is diverse and they understand what it is to be a English language learner, or they have people in their company that is representative of people who have lived experience like us, that would be telling. But I understand that you think that we can pull on the levers of the external partners who, again, aren't doing this work, like you and Ralph are in the work day in and day out. Nonprofits in our community aren't in our school districts, and understand the complexity of things we're dealing with, but I appreciate the answer.
I believe that if they had the, I would say, successful experience with Holyoke,
They do.
not only because it's a gateway city, because also it has the socioeconomic, language, cultural, I think similarities than Lawrence. It would make me feel that it is a organization or a company that has the experience to do something like this. The only thing I was thinking was then, are we better off more organized than maybe Holyoke was at the time that they started? Because we already have engaged in a range of strategies?
I think Holyoke did as well. I think we're pretty
Okay.
much in the same spot that they were.
All right, so even better, I guess. I don't have any other questions.
I would just like to mention, Madam Chair, that ERS is a contracted service recognized by the Department of Education. The Department of Education helped initiate the search for the particular vendor in this particular case. So a lot of conversation has happened around. And I just want to echo on Mrs. Matia's comments. She's very passionate about Lawrence, especially multilingual students. The work that they've done in Holyoke and reading their plan, I was impressed on them being able to articulate in writing the demographics that they have, the challenges that they have, and incorporate the cultures. And if you know, Holyoke has mostly a predominantly Puerto Rican culture.
Puerto Rican,
And they were very instrumental in meeting. And I think, Ms. Matias, that's one of the key elements that I think that's important. I don't believe that when we initially went into receivership, that we did a thorough vesting of our stakeholders. I think that it was a time when our community was in shock. I think it was a time that when that particular plan was developed, folks just wanted to see success of our kids. It was a different mindset. It was a different community at the time. I think that when you now take and you look at stakeholders, for example, our multilingual department, our parents came out in record numbers. Over 300 of them were at our last PAC meeting last week. Our parents are eager to have conversations. We have started to prepare them at the beginning of this school year. Our different subgroups, whether it's special education, multi-language students, or even our adult students. And what we've been preaching to them is that it's time for us to dream, but it's time for us to dream big. And as a stakeholder group, it's important that their voices are heard and they talk about not just the successes that they've recently had of their kids, but more importantly, where they want to see the services of Lawrence Public Schools and where their kids can achieve at the maximum level. So while I respect your opinion and I'm proud that you're constantly focusing on those particular subgroups of students, it's the questioning that we had for Dr. Smith and her team to make sure that they understand the uniqueness of our community. And she felt very confident, and she told us about the stories that happened in Holyoke, and they did a very thorough plan in presenting to Holyoke, which was adopted unanimously by the board. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know if anyone has any other questions. I know you guys were mentioning timelines. Is a 6-month timeline typically what's done, or is it a year timeline? And if it's typically a year, do we feel confident that we're going to get the best outcomes and products in a 6-month time frame?
The complexity of the plan is really not going to be completely known until they do their diagnostic. But their experience, and as they related to us, they felt confident that even though the timeline was aggressive, that it could be done. But we're not, if we see, we're not going to just, at the 6-month period, cut it off. If we see that we need further meetings, if we need further development, if we need anything like that, we will extend this because we do want the best product at the end of the day.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Carlos. And then I think my last question, would the strategic plan include elements of governance? So like we're still figuring out our home rule petition.
Yes,
Just-
actually.
I don't know if you
that's-
guys can share a little bit on like that because I feel like it's nuanced.
Yes, actually, if you look at page 4, that's one of the things that I told them that we needed to incorporate in there. And I had mentioned it before in the policy discussion of the subcommittee, where we need to really think about, as this is a new operating model, does that require new policies? That we need to take a look at that. But we put this in page 4 and made them very aware of that new change that we're having.
Super helpful. Thank you.
If I can elaborate on that, Ms. Matias. Yes, one of the stipulations in transitioning out of receivership is that we have a plan of action for training and assessment for whatever the makeup structure is of the governing body. And that is incorporated into the strategic plan where anyone that wishes to potentially serve on the next governing board should be participating in several of these stakeholder groups, that they will discuss policy, what the responsibilities of the governing body are, and that includes budget, evaluation, and curriculum. Furthermore, Mr. Matos, when he presented earlier on the policy committee from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, we will also incorporate there the training model of what should be the model for anyone wishing to serve on the school committee and what type of training programs they should be going through. So we're going to try to scaffold these particular trainings and assessments in as many documents as possible so that we can assure whatever governance structure happens, the people that are involved there have an understanding of what their roles and responsibilities are as a board.
That's helpful. And then I guess Carlos and Superintendent, you know, we're still going through a legislative process. So maybe there could be a contingency in this contract that says that whatever, you know, that we'd love them to finish this portion of whatever governance looks like, depending on where we land there, if that makes any sense.
It does.
It does.
Okay, great.
I have a quick question. Would they be providing updates throughout the 6 months?
Yes, they would.
To the board?
It's actually part of the schedule in terms of the deliverables. They will be providing updates to us. Yes.
Right. Thank you.
I think this is my last questions and apologies, but
No worries.
the strategic plan, it's for 3 to 5 years. How many years?
3 to
Correct.
5.
Usually it's 3 to 5, yes.
3 to 5. Does it have goals around student achievement, MCAS, college enrollment, or is it more general than that?
I think that it will have definite goals around those. If you look at the document that they prepared, they're looking at those types of things as well in terms of what the vision is. So if the vision is that we will be a system that graduates X number of students or X percentage of students, that should be incorporated into the plan, yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
No more questions?
Is there any other company that does this?
There are other companies that do strategic planning. There's no other company that we have seen that has their unique experience with a district that's been in receivership and with turnarounds.
There you go.
We selected ERS from a group of about 24 companies that are contracted through the Department of Education. We narrowed it down to 3. We were able to talk to 2 of them that were interested, and obviously the one that came out favorable was with Education Resource Strategies. Okay?
That's helpful, Ralph. Another question on that, just because I was a part of the last process for hiring our superintendent and selecting the consulting. Did you and Carlos, were you able to meet with ERS, and do you both feel comfortable?
Yes, we met with them several times.
Yes, that is correct.
Excellent. Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I will ask for a motion to approve.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I would ask for a motion to approve contracted services with ERS in the amount of $147,000.
So moved?
Second?
Maria, would you please call the roll?
Yosel Calaf,
Yes.
Juana Matias,
Yes.
Chair Maria Muller,
Yes.
Mayor Brian De Peña,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is
you.
it.
Next item is superintendent's report, so take it away.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to start with our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. Long title, major role, very important initiative. She wasn't able to be with us at our last meeting, and I know that Ms. Matias was chomping at the bits to wanting to have this conversation. So please welcome Ms. Glenny Sanchez, our Educator Diversity Director. Glenny's welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. So 3 times the charm, I'm here to present. So I am here before you today to talk about our efforts and strategic initiatives to increase educator diversity. So I'll start with a disclaimer that this is not all of our initiatives to do diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. This is specifically around increasing educator diversity. So I know that you might have questions, comments under that umbrella that are not addressed tonight, so I'm happy to come back at another time with other updates. But today we're going to focus on increasing educator diversity. This presentation has 3 main components. I will start a little bit with reviewing the research and why we need to focus on increasing educator diversity. I'll share a little bit of our Lawrence data and then share a little bit of our strategic initiatives to diversify. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, so I'll speed through some of the research pieces. If somebody can help me advance to the next slide, that'd be great. Awesome. Thank you. So we know that a more diverse teacher workforce is important for our students in the work of creating more equitable learning experiences. The research base is very clear that having a teacher of color, especially between kindergarten and 3rd grade, can boost academic achievement, high school graduation rates, and college enrollment rates. So there is lots of research that support that. And I'll add to the social emotional benefits of having a teacher of color in your younger experiences. Next slide, please. This is more of some recent research in Massachusetts trends. So the research I just showed, it's a little older, but this report specifically that is also linked into your slides, so you can read at your own time, in pursuit of greatness, calls out really the complexity of increasing educator diversity, especially in Massachusetts. So even if the state, and the state referring to as the Department of Education, continues with all the wonderful and meaningful initiatives that they're currently leading, teachers of color will still likely represent less than 14% of the teacher workforce at the end of the decade. So when we think about 2030, at the state level, we are going to be at around 14%. So I'm giving you all this context so that you can keep it in the back of your mind as we look into our Lawrence data later. And we know that the root causes of this disparity are multiple and deep. So it's not only a matter of employment discrimination in hiring. It has many causes, some systemic causes. So we all in this work thinking about what are the best ways to diversify our workforce. And lastly, in Massachusetts and really also around the nation, we have a smaller pool of talent. And a lot of our high school students are not considering careers in education. Then that's the reality. Next slide, please. So the data that we're going to look at today, the source is DESE's Educator Data Dashboard. It's also linked into your slides, is data that is publicly available. So for the audience that is also on Zoom, you can look at our educator data, educator diversity data on your own. It is very digestible and accessible data. The data set displays the annual number and percent of distinct educators who self-report and identify as a selected race and ethnicity on the first weekday in October. So think about being at a snapshot of where we are on October 1st. And the data that we're going to see is from school year 2023 and 2024. So as we speak, we collected the last snapshot of 2024, but that data will not be available until February 2025. So happy again to come back in the spring to look at the new data. So this is a review of side-by-side of our staff and student demographics data. So I'm going to read this slide from right to left. Nothing surprising here. As a Latino majority city, 95% of our students identify as Latino or Hispanic. And I'll make a note that these racial and ethnic categories are not our own. This is the way that DESE reports their race and ethnicity data. So you see the breakdown. It's sort of the way that DESE collects the data. So when you see on our, if we can go, yes, thank you. If you see, as you see on our left, we have, I can't read this very tiny number. The blue is, it represents our staff. I heard some, the blue represents the staff that self-identified as white, and the purple is our Latino representation. And this is for all staff.
So you got 64% white and 32% Latino.
Yes.
On your slide.
So these two, this pie chart is all of our staff. So teachers, administrator, everyone that is an LPS employee is counted in this number. And then you'll see the very small representation from other racial and ethnic identities. So I'll just give you 1 second just to take in sort of that disparity between how the demographics of our students look and the demographics of our staff. Next slide, please. So the next 3 slides, we're going to look at some disaggregated data that I think will be important to review. And there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but I would love for you to pay attention to the bottom, which are the last 3 years, and look at the trends. So you will see that for staff that identified as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, the administrator core has stayed stable. The teacher core, we have a small percentage increase. Paraprofessionals have a slightly bigger bump. And the last 2 categories are other staff, some that require a license, and others that are non-licensed. So we'll go to the next slide to specifically look our Latino and Hispanic data. So again, that mirrors a little bit of the data that we just saw. So stable administrator core, a little bit of an increase in the teacher core, and as we know, most of our paraprofessionals identified as Latino and Hispanic, and you'll see the little bumps in the other 2 categories as well. So what I really want to highlight in this slide is that paraprofessional core. That's what I call our gem. That's our people who are in classrooms, who are in schools. And as we think about diversifying our teacher core, that's where our assets are. Next slide, please. And lastly, the last piece on this aggregated data is for you to see our demographics by race. So these are all our educators that identified as white. So about 77% of our administrator identified as white, and again, sort of a steady administrator core there. Our teacher core also lost a little bit there, and our paraprofessionals also had a decline. So as we get more Latino and Hispanic paraprofessionals, we also lost at the same rate some of our paraprofessionals who identified as white. Next slide, please. Okay, so I give you a lot of data to see, to think about. So what are we doing to diversify our educator workforce in Lawrence? So I want to share a few of our initiatives. So we have different pathways to diversify our educator workforce. One of them is reaching into the LPS families and parents. So we have a long-standing relationship with multiple agencies. So the Lawrence Working Families Initiative, I believe, is in its 5th year now. And this initiative is meant to support LPS families and adult learners to become paraprofessionals. To this date, 108 folks have graduated from the program, and many of them are employed in our schools. The second initiative is our paraprofessional to educator pathway. So when I show you the data, I mentioned this is really our asset and our gem. So we're creating pathways for paraprofessionals from our community to become licensed teachers. We have a 4-year partnership now with Regis College to provide affordable higher education opportunities. We have 17 paraprofessionals enrolled in that partnership, and 5 of them have already graduated either with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. Our second growing partnership is with the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and I'll share a little bit more about that specific partnership in our next slide. So this piece I wanted to highlight. So all of our partners are important and they are doing incredible work with us. I really wanted to highlight one particular partnership, our growing partnership with University of Massachusetts Lowell. So we have a pathway for paraprofessionals to get their bachelor's in education. Also, we have 2 brand new leadership pathways for school leaders to get their master's in education administration, and for central office staff to get a master's in public administration, and that's a non-licensure track. And to share a little bit about the demographics of those 2 tracks, the administrator track is 90% BIPOC, and the master's in public administration track is 100% a BIPOC cohort. And we
What
have,
is BIPOC?
BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. And we have 10 to 12 leaders in each of the tracks. This is year 1 semester. They just finished semester 1. They're doing great, and they're past their courses.
So just so that I understand, Glennie, you're saying the partnership exists, it's in place, and when you look at the people that are enrolled right now, they're all BIPOC individuals.
Correct.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So I wanted to also highlight this particular pathway. So the pathway to get a bachelor's of education, now we have 33 paraprofessionals currently enrolled in the program, and we're opening up to 25 seats in the spring of 2025. These are all folks from our community. 98% of the folks that we interview for the new cohort are BIPOC. And we just finished our interviews, and it's an impressive cohort of paraprofessionals who are interested in becoming certified teachers. And this particular program, it's a Bachelor of Education in elementary education. We know the need we have, especially in the lower grades. And at the end of the program, teachers or paraprofessionals will be endorsed in K-8 moderate disabilities, and also be endorsed to be certified teachers in grades 1 through 6. And this is funded by DESE's Educator Workforce Diversity Grant, so we're being able to leverage the funds that the DESE provides to really put more of our paraprofessionals to those pathways. As we're building these partnerships, we are really focusing on the lived experiences of our paraprofessionals and including their feedback into the design of the program. So we have included ways to mitigate their financial barriers, so all the books and materials are included. Grants have been able to provide critical living stipends, so our paras are not taking second or third jobs, and they really focus on their studies. And all the classes are most of the classes are in person, so they come to school at night in one of our schools. So they go from being a para to being a student at night. In Lawrence, they don't have to go to Lowell. And UMass Lowell provides a full-time pathway coach for all of their academic needs. And we also included in this semester some mental health support, so social emotional support for our paraprofessionals, and we have an in-residence therapist. In addition to those, we know that the MTELs and other tests are also a barrier, so we are providing MTEL prep courses and test reimbursement, and we are prioritizing our emergency license holders so that they can pass the communication and literacy MTEL, which is required for everyone, including counselors and nurses. And we also have provided para-pro test prep courses, and it will also include the cost of the tests. And as I mentioned, the DESE Teacher Diversification Grant, we have been able to provide tuition assistance, which is different from tuition reimbursement, to BIPOC educators for whom the financial barrier was a barrier to get to the next piece of their education. So other things on the horizon. So I share sort of the things that we're doing now, but we're also working on other things, including rebuilding the high school education pathway. We need to make sure that our students are also considering careers in education early on. When we think about diversification, it's not just of teachers, it's not just of administrators. We also need to diversify our school counseling staff and other support staff. We're also providing some coaching support to pass the PALS, which is the Performance Assessment Leaders for administrators and principals. So our BIPOC leaders are on their way to be also certified administrators. And we are currently examining hiring, recruiting, and retention practices through an equity lens, and also examining our internal data collection and reporting so we can do a really good job with using data for action planning. So I included an appendix that we're not going to review tonight. These are some other data from that report I mentioned that gives you a little bit more flavor into the Massachusetts landscape. If you have any questions for me, I will entertain them at this moment.
Any
Thank you,
questions?
Lenise, for the presentation. Super informative and helpful. One question I have, it seems like, we're building the pipeline of our paraprofessionals, ensuring that they're getting access to tuition, not just reimbursement, but paying for tuition and coaching. It all sounds really great. What is the guarantee that once this person finishes, after getting all of these resources and our support, that they're going to come and teach in Lawrence?
So thanks for the question, Ms. Matias. We're asking them for a commitment of 3 years after they complete the programs. So as we are building these pathways, so the high retention pathways, and all the coaching and sort of the one-on-one work feeds into that retention piece. So the hope is that when they're done, I want to see them back here leading to classrooms, leading our schools. So it's a 3-year commitment after completion of their programs. And that mirrors some of what other districts are doing across the Commonwealth. That when they complete, they stay in our district.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Other comments?
I would also say that we also have to start at a younger age. Can't wait till they're in high school. So I have an idea that I would share with you another day.
Okay. Miss Coliff is always full of surprises. But I think Miss Sanchez touched upon making sure that we expose our high school kids through a pathway of giving them an opportunity to know what it is to be a teacher. If you want to share a little bit of that.
Yeah,
Ms.
so
Sanchez.
and that's critical. So in the appendix, I mentioned some other data. What we are learning is that for us to really move the needle, we need to invest in different buckets, right? So retaining only the educators that we have right now is not going to move it for us. So we have to retain. We also have to encourage new high school students to even consider going into education. And we need to also work on our school culture. So when I talk to students all the time about being educators, and many times it's not only a salary reason, it's also why would you come back to the schools when you probably didn't have a good experience? So the other part of this, the work and that DEIB umbrella is really taking a look at our school culture so our students have good experiences and they can see in the teachers that all the pathways that we are building, they can see themselves in the classroom as well.
Again, I believe that it even has to be younger than high school.
Okay.
There has been an example that happened in Worcester on a medical school that had the same issues. And the way that they implemented at a intermediate level, it was so successful that even one of the prior students became the medical director for the university, the medical school. So I think, I mean, we're not going to resolve it right now here, but I would say it is something that would be, throughout the entire year in how to make the younger children aware of the difference that they will make, not only in their lives, but in others as well.
Mrs. Kalev, I appreciate that, and I would love to come back in the spring because the high school pathway piece that we're building does have a middle school component so that they can be exposed to thinking about education careers, even thinking about some of the social issues that are around them as a way to start to thinking about themselves as educators. So I'm happy to come back and share a little bit of how we're doing the high school piece, but also how we are incorporating middle schoolers into that pathway.
Good.
One other question, Glenys. When we talk about the educator diversity grants that DESE is providing, is that competitive grants or is it based on communities that have the largest amount of underserved students? Is there a way for us, if we're showing that, we're leveraging these dollars really well to be able to get even more money? How does that work?
So they are, up to this point, they are competitive grants, and there are some contingencies of participation in some of their professional learning communities. But historically, Lawrence have received those awards in the past 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
No more comments? Thank you, Glenys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Madam Chair, our next presenter is Dr. Did you pass the test? Yeah. Dr. Jen Perry. She specializes in education. I thought when she came, she said, I finished. The first thing I told her was, I have a pain in my elbow. She said, I can't help you.
Yeah, I can't diagnose that.
Just finished her doctorate dissertation, our assistant superintendent. She's going to present on the school autonomy framework. And I know autonomy sometimes seems like a challenging word, but there is a method to the madness of school autonomy. And under her team, she works with the school autonomy framework, and more importantly, engaging our schools and helping to analyze and designate the support services for those schools that are ranked within the system that we have. So without further ado, Ms. Jen Perry.
Good evening. So as Superintendent said, I'm here on behalf of the Management Committee, actually, who was here last spring and presented some of the slides that you'll see tonight. I chose a couple of them as a reminder just to sort of frame out the presentation, but my real focus for tonight is to sort of talk about the designation process and the data that we use to get to the designations for schools in terms of this framework. So I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I missed that.
There you go.
Was that me or was that you? That was me? Okay, great. So the first slide is one that might be familiar to some. This is what the school autonomy framework is. And essentially, it is a tool and a process that helps schools to better understand their performance across multiple measures, and we're going to talk about those measures tonight, in terms of academics and environment. All right? And as I said, we're going to get right into the designation process, but there's a couple slides here that still might be familiar from the spring of last year. So this is sort of the framework at a glance and the elements of the school autonomy framework. So the first thing that I'll say is that we have from Open Architects, which is an organization that creates data visualization dashboards, some pretty unique and interesting dashboards that look at performance across grade bands. So we have an elementary, a middle school, a high school, and an early education dashboard that we can look at, and principals also have access to look at the data sort of at a glance for their school and be able to look at all students as well as subgroups of students in terms of performance measures. The next part of this is the priority indicators. So the way the dashboards are designed are around several priority indicators, and those are pedagogy, safety and environment, student academic and developmental support, multilingual learner outcomes, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging indicators. So that's kind of the structure of the dashboards and how those data components kind of fall into it, which I'll talk about in a moment. That leads us to being able to get to designations, and those designations are three. There's opt-in, targeted, and intensive are the three designations that a school could fall into based on their measures. And then finally, we get to, once we have those designations, applying supports, and as the language sort of suggests, if you're in an opt-in designation, the schools can opt into the types of supports that they have based on the designation. Targeted is the district sort of providing guidance about what kinds of supports that they should be focused on, and then providing some of those supports for them to choose from. And then intensive is a more targeted and intensive process in terms of supports and guided by a partner that I'll talk about in just a moment. All right. So how is this used? Again, this is another slide that might be familiar. This is looking really at the timeline. So data is often released in the early fall or late fall window. So we collect all of that. We get that into the dashboards. And then around this time is when the school designation process happens. So we're a subset of the leadership team is looking at all of that data that is in the dashboard and making those determinations using a rubric that has been designed to guide the designation process. So I can report that we concluded that process today, and we're able to do both the opt-in targeted and the intensive designations as of today with those dashboards. And the purpose of all of this is to really inform the school planning process and the goal setting process at each school. So that's where this is leading to. So we'll be communicating those designations in the new year in January, and then schools, principals, and teacher leadership teams will be using those to guide their thinking around school planning and goal setting. So the next slide is are really getting into the meat of why I'm here today. So that was all kind of a review of where we've been. This is kind of the new layered information that you might not have heard previously. So the first process of this is looking at round one. That's looking at the opt-in and targeted. So we look at all the schools in the district, and these are the elements that are on that dashboard. So we're looking at MCAS growth percentiles for both ELA and math. We're looking at MAP data, which is an internal benchmark, the growth percentiles for that for ELA and math. We're looking at DIBELS, which is an oral fluency, and the data around that. Access data, which is primarily for our English language learners and their performance. We look at school quality review ratings that we get from the School Empowerment Network, which was one of our main partners in terms of looking at elements of school design. We look at chronic absentee rates and absence rates in general, and then we look at student and educator surveys where they exist. At the lower elementary levels, the student surveys don't exist, so some of these things adjust based on the grade band and where they apply. But that's the round one, and that's really looking at all schools to determine opt-in and targeted. The next slide talks about intensive. So these are the same measures, and I've highlighted in bold the additions. So we look, when we see schools that are rated in targeted, we take a closer look and we look at the intensive dashboard through the lens of the same things that I just mentioned, but we add achievement for MCAS and we add achievement for MAP. And then down below, we start to look at comparisons between growth and achievement. We look at historical trends. What's a 3-year story of data looking like for each school? We look at the DESE accountability percentiles as well, and we really dive into subgroups and subgroup achievement and growth. The other thing that we take into consideration at the end of the process for intensive are other factors that might be influencing the data profile of a school, including changes in leadership or other things that might have happened in the last few years that could have impacted the results for the school. The last slide here that I have is a new and adjusted time frame for what intensive support means. So prior to this, and I preface this by saying, we're in a pilot year of this process, right? So we're only a few months into what these designations mean and intensive support means for schools. So this is very much, an iterative process. But one of these things that we've noticed is needing to provide the intensive support sooner in the school year so that we can have our partner, SEN, alongside our principals in the strategic planning process of school planning. So what we've done is we've condensed our timeline for designations to get that done. As I said earlier, we got that done officially today, so that we can then recommend intensive support schools for that onboarding of our partner, which is SEN, our primary partner, in January, to work with our principals in particular between January and June through the strategic planning process to ensure that all of the systems and structures are in place for a successful fall start. What had happened previously is that our partner came in June, and some of those decisions had been made, and they had to kind of live and work around those systems and structures that might really influence what they felt like were important changes for student outcomes. So hopefully with this adjustment in our timeline, onboarding schools in intensive support in January will help to ensure a successful start to the fall school year in 25-26. The other additional change is that in year one, so when they move into the fall, currently right now schools have an SQR once a year. Intensive schools will have that full SQR once a year, but they'll also have 2 additional mini SQRs that are entirely focused on instruction. So they're kind of progress monitoring touch points about how are we doing in terms of making changes in terms of instruction, which we know are big levers for student outcomes. So we're adding those additional SQRs, they're called ISQRs, which are only focused on instruction, We're starting that this year for the schools that had been designated and that are kind of in that process now. But next year, all the intensive schools will have a full SQR and then 2 mini SQRs as well. And so that rounds out the year 1 and year 2 support. And so
What are
that's-
SQRs?
SQRs are school quality reviews, thank you. And that's a process that SEN comes in, they look at a variety of data points and artifacts from the school, but they also come in for a school visit and see practice, have conversations with educators and other stakeholders, and then provide a detailed report about their findings based on their rubric. And in this case, it would be the instructional core, which is pedagogy, curriculum, and assessment would be the main focus for that mini SQR. Okay, and I believe that's it. So any questions about that process or any wonderings that you have about the data that's associated with the designation process?
Any questions?
Go ahead, Maria.
No, well, no, you start. Go ahead, Juana. I was just asking if any questions.
My question, do we put in the data ourselves into the system? And then I think you answered this, Jen, when you were saying your presentation, but I just want to make sure that I understood it correctly. So we just finished putting the data in today. We're now going to allow our teachers across the district to leverage this data to help inform curriculum and goal planning for the next couple of months. Does that same data run into the fall, even though students are changing classrooms and having different teachers?
So the data dashboards, the data that's being pulled into there is being pulled from a variety of sources internally. So from PowerSchool in different places that's holding the data, right? Or from the other places where we get components, whether it's chronic absenteeism, these types of things. So that stuff has been updated for this school year. However, when I say that, there are components of that are not reflective of today, right? So MCAS is going to be last spring's MCAS. The DIBELS math and MAP will be from last school year. So one of the things that has been part of our thinking and process around this is that when the school designation process didn't happen until the spring, some of that data was almost a year old. So we're kind of condensing that timeline to make the designations more relevant to the current data or the most recent data that we have. And so that's one component of it. And so that data and those data dashboards have been updated. Our designation process ended today, so we'll end up putting those designations into the dashboards so that when principals look at their dashboard, they'll not only be able to see their school profile and all those data points, but they'll also be able to see along those primary indicators of pedagogy, environment, oh gosh, my memory is not that great. Student academic and developmental support, the multilingual learners and the DEIB, they'll be able to see what their designation is per each of those indicators as well. So that's at the principal level, and they'll be able to share that with their teacher leadership teams to make those planning decisions and strategic planning. So the data is, it's as current as it can be, and yet there's still going to be a lag inherently based on when some of these data points come out. Is that helpful? And answer your question?
Yes, that is.
Okay,
Thank you
okay.
so much.
Yep. Yeah, yes.
So all of this framework here, how is it going to interact with this project that we just approved with the ERS people?
I'm failing to understand the question.
Okay, this school autonomy framework,
Yep.
all this data, all this information that is analyzed through this process, is it going to be included in their work for the plan that is going to be done with the ERS folks?
I would suspect that the strategic plan has more elevated
Level.
level. to look at the direction of where the district's going. When you drill down within the district, then the schools must incorporate,
This,
yes,
at this level,
at this level, correct. However,
lower level.
this framework that they're using is to make sure schools are succeeding and kids are learning. And the data points that they're using, if we see that kids aren't moving in the direction that they have to move, she used the words intense. More support goes to those schools. If we still see that kids aren't achieving based on those data points that we have, then obviously you have harder conversation as to determine teacher effectiveness,
Right,
school leader effectiveness,
all the different areas.
and if there are changes required at that level. Exactly. But each school will understand what the strategic plan is, and they need to be able to incorporate into each one of those schools whatever that plan is moving forward. So let's take, for example, within the strategic plan, it was decided that all students will have an experience annually in going on field trips to visit different cultural components. They incorporate that into their plan. They develop then measurable outcomes of those experiences in a rudimentary, very simplified manner. That's the example that I can give you. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, so it's like the bigger picture and then how specific components are taken by each school? Is that what I'm understanding?
If it's in the strategic plan, it's brushed across the entire district. So every school has
Every
to.
school, yeah, okay,
Make sense?
yeah.
Any other questions, Madam Chair?
I just had a comment similar to Juana. When I first heard, this was maybe over a year ago now, about SAF and the description, my main concern was that it's a 2-year cycle because we are planning for next year based on data from last year. And I'm happy to hear that there's going to be additional SQRs embedded or included, during that process, because otherwise we'll have we have an opportunity from January, February through May of that same year to implement strategies that really the student may need. And we know because of the assessments that are happening that same year.
I think those mini SQRs are really a place for us to reflect and determine,
Right.
are we on the right path? Just like we do with instruction, right? Like it's those progress monitoring checkpoints to say, how is this support, how is it working? Is it working, and like, do we need to have course adjustments in terms of other thinking or additional supports that might be needed?
That's great. More of that, yes.
Yeah.
If you recall, Madam Chair, because I know you're an educator, so you're used to listening to the promises from the Department of Education that they gave us early on. MCAS, in its first version, they implemented it. And the complaint was, well, you give us all of these results and it's in the middle of the next year. How could we use it for planning purposes? So then they reduced it, and when they became automated, if you recall, they were supposed to have it ready by the end of the school year so teachers can use it in their planning the following school year, right, in September. That never happened. We still have to take the test, and we don't get those results till, October-ish, right? So what educators have done is that we use the MCAS results as a checkpoint. The real achievement benchmarks that we use are what Ms. Perry mentioned, Juana, as our MAP data. So we benchmark our kids at the beginning of the school year. We will benchmark our kids as soon as they come back from the winter break. And that's the next relevant achievement scores that we use to then plan where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, where the adjustment in curriculum, and how do we then adjust for those other subgroups. So when the MCAS scores came out, we used to see if they correlate together. And if they correlate together, then we know that we're on the right track. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So,
does. And then my only follow-up question would be, I love the fact that we have multiple benchmarks. What happens, come January, we come back after the winter break? What are the real interventions are we putting in at our schools? Is it really just internally, the teacher readjusting the curriculum? Are we bringing outside sources? Like, what does that really look like?
Well, I can say Dr. Katarius is doing a great job meeting with schools and talking about their data in a really nuanced and granular way to say, here's this subgroup of students, and I should probably defer to her because she knows better, but I hear the great work that she's doing both from her and from the school teams. Looking at the data and really looking at the lagging skills that groups of students have, and then applying interventions. Almost all of our schools have an intervention block in their school day. Most of them call it WIN, what I need. And so they're leveraging that now in a more strategic way with Lynn's help to look at groups of students and be able to target what it is that those students actually need and be able to monitor that over a cycle of time. So I think we're building that, and Lynn, I'm going to say she can speak more to it because she's coming up right after me. But I think that's one of those pieces, but then it's also looking at what that intervention curriculum is, like what are the high quality instructional supplemental materials that we have to support those intervention blocks, so that those, as we go from tier 1, which is the curriculum for all students, that's high quality instructional materials almost throughout the whole district at this point. Are we ensuring that intervention time is also high quality instructional materials to really target specific needs that our students have? And that's work that we need to do a little bit more. So there's a little bit more work to do there in particular with intervention, but I think we're on a pretty good path with that.
So Dr. Perry explained it to you from a high-level educator's point of view. Let me give you the Lawrence version, Ms. Matias. When the teachers get map data from the winter benchmark, they're required to look at every student and determine if they moved up in achievement. If they haven't moved up in achievement, then they got to go back into their response to intervention groups and develop new strategies that will address the deficiencies. And once they reach whatever strategy they're going to use for that intervention, whether the student needs more pull-out classes, whether the student needs more English language reinforcement, or whether the student, if it's early on, needs more literacy or reading, those building blocks get put into their schedule, and the teacher meets on a regular basis with the leadership team in each school to progress monitor the results weekly of how that student is doing. Within that framework for 6 weeks, they monitor those interventions to see if they're having an effect on students. Then at the end of that, in the spring, they will map test them again. So our map program is a norm reference test that assesses students at every grade level across the United States. So that test has been in the district now for over 10 years, and the reason we have used the MAP data is because it's the best indicator that correlates with the state Massachusetts MCAS system. Okay? So more importantly, the internal instruments that we use to see if kids are learning or not learning is the basis that we use to determine those interventions. That system is called MTSS. If you remember early on in September, I said that's something that the Department of Education is mandating that we as a district implement, and that every school has a multi-tiered system of support for all their students. It can be different because obviously you have early intervention schools, early childhood schools, you have middle schools, and you have the high school. But every school must have an agreed upon multi-tiered system to monitor students. And those are the types of things that I do when I visit schools now, is I sit in on their response to intervention and listen to teachers and talk to teachers to see how they're delivering those interventions and how they're determining what the needs of the kids are. Make sense?
It makes perfect sense. My only last question is that feasible? If I'm a teacher and I'm teaching 30 to 40 kids in a classroom, which is likely in some of our classrooms.
No, ma'am.
In,
No
no, we're
more.
lower than that. Then that's great to hear. In addition to that, can that teacher give that one-on-one intentional, multi-tiered intervention to the student that's lagging?
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of work in systems and structures to support teachers to do that. But yes, and I think there's structures, like I had mentioned, like the intervention block to really support the student and to support the teacher to be able to think about what the particular needs of students are in smaller group.
And you have support staff within each school that specializes in, for example, reading or math, social emotional. So the one-on-one or the pull-out for that student can happen as a pull-out, or the teacher, the specialist, can go into the classroom and push in.
That makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Last but not least, annually we are required to report, based on our turnaround plan, our measurable annual goals. And to present that is another doctor. I talked to her about my knees and my golf game. She said, I can't help you. She is an expert in our data and assessment system. Dr. Lynn Kateris.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having me this evening. I'm sure people are getting tired, so it's been talked out a lot, so we'll try to move through this. So I wanted to just share with you that with the turnaround plans, in the second version of the turnaround plan that was done in 2015 was the first time that these measurable annual goals were put in. There's about 30 of them. Most of them, the data is provided by DESE. There's a few that are provided by the district. And then every 3 years, these seem to be updated. So we're now in the fourth version of the turnaround plan, and these are the current findings within that we're going to share tonight, which is just the last 3 years of data. 30 was a lot, so I tried to put them, we put them into sort of 3 buckets. We put them into student engagement, student achievement, and culture of academic progress. And so each of these indicators are within those. We'll start with our student engagement. So that looks at attendance, suspensions, retention in 9th grade, our graduation rate, dropout rates, and our extended engagement, which is at the high school level. One of the things you will notice is, well, there's 2 things. One, the targets are set by DESE, and they change based on our results from the previous year. And then the next thing is that I've tried to set this up so that you'll see in the tables, the top will always be the target that is set, and the bottom is the actual score or what we earned on that. And then it's hard to see on here, but I tried to do little green arrows or red arrows so we could sort of see if we were seeing an increase or decrease. We decided, because it's 3 years of data, in order to make a determination whether we were meeting, not meeting, we looked at each year. So if we've got 2 years where we're seeing that increase or we're meeting the target, we're calling that meeting. If we see 2 years where we're not, we're calling that not meeting. And if we have a year where we met and a year where we didn't meet that target, we're going to call that mixed at this point. So in terms of attendance, you can see at the top our chart there. We had that blip right after COVID. We were doing well, had the little blip, and now we're heading back up in the right direction, and we continue to meet our targets for that. In terms of chronically absent, we talked about this back in October. Our grades 1 to 8 are meeting our targets for decreasing those students who are attending school or having less than 18 days absent, or 18 days absent is what is chronically absent. At high school, we had a good year in 22-23, but this last year, 23-24, our chronic absenteeism went back up. So we have mixed results for that. In terms of suspensions, our in-school suspension, again, mixed results. However, we still are at a pretty low rate compared to, the district or the state average. In terms of out-of-school suspensions, we're not meeting those targets, but again, we went from 2.9 to 2.5 to 2.1. So we're making progress. We're just not meeting the targets that DESE has set for us.
What is our policy on external out-of-school suspensions? Like what merits an out-of-school suspension for students in the Lawrence Public School System?
We try to discourage out-of-school suspension because we've implemented a comprehensive restorative justice program to try to keep kids in school. So short of those big three, which is weapons, drugs, assaults, is where you would probably, and depending on the nature of a very aggressive fight, would carry an out-of-school suspension. I don't think that any other disciplinary action would require an out-of-school suspension. They would be considered in-house.
Okay, great. I'd love, maybe looking at this data, Ralph, this is something that I care much about. I think especially in underserved poor districts, if students are already struggling to perform, right? And I agree with you, weapons, risk of life are valuable reasons why people should be suspended, but I'd love to see at a different meeting, like, all right, what is that 2.2 and what merited that suspension? Because I think Black and brown poor students, the last thing they need to do is be outside of school. And so would love to kind of delve in, and I'll follow up via email because I'd love to see more concrete numbers and what the reasoning were around this. As a school district with our population, I think we need to be really intentional.
I appreciate that, definitely.
And one of the data points that I did not put on this slide, but is on the page that you got, was we had 0 students who were suspended out of school for more than 10 days.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
So our high school completion measures, so we looked at 9th grade retention. Again, we had mixed. The first year we met the target. The second year we did not meet the target. Our dropout rate, again, we saw a decrease last year, but we're below the target barely. We were at 3.1 was the target. We had 3.3, so we were close. Our 4-year graduation rate, we met the target in, again, 22-23, did not meet it last year. So again, we're having mixed results. And our extended engagement, although we didn't meet our target, we're continuing to see, high 80s, almost 90% of our students who are coming back to complete high school. So even though that target of 90 was set because we were so high at 88.5 in 2023, it made our target that much higher. And so I think we're still seeing really good results and good things happening with extended engagement. We're just not meeting that state target. In terms of student achievement, the focus of the turnaround plan was really on MCAS achievement, our growth for our local measure, and then access, something the superintendent just said recently or just a few minutes ago, and that we continue to push in our schools, is that we need to really focus on achievement. Achievement accounts for 60% of our accountability, and we want to make sure that students are not just growing, but growing at rates that we're closing that achievement gap. And so I've been having lots of conversations. The superintendent has been having conversations with principals and teachers to talk about what does that mean. And so if you look at this, even though our MAP growth shows that we met our target, we're at about 60%. What we know is students need to grow at almost 70 or 80 percentile to close that gap. And so how do we get them to grow at those rates so that our achievement is increasing? Because what you'll see across the board is in ELA, math, and science, we are not meeting our achievement targets that have been set by the state. And again, these are based on our score one year, they set the target for the next year. We see, again, we're significantly below on those targets. Oops, I went too many. So the first one was ELA, math, grades 3 to 8. We saw some increase from last year, but again, we're continuing to see a gap between our target and our actual achievement that we're doing. So we want to continue to focus on that.
Could you elaborate? So I know we were just mentioning how MAP is critically important, right?
Yep.
And we have the MCAS, and we're clearly not on target in the MCAS. Shouldn't they be correlating a little bit more? And if so, why not? If we're doing so well on MAP and we're seeing achievement and it's tracking student learning, why are MCAS scores so low?
Right. So I think it's when you talk about achievement and growth, we think that they go together. So even if you look at our MCAS growth, we actually do pretty well as a district on our MCAS growth as well. We have what the state would call typical growth. So they say typical growth is between the 40th and the 60th percentile. And many of our students are in that, and our average growth percentile is within that range. However, what I have been saying to staff is I can have typical growth, but it doesn't mean my achievement's increased, because I can score the same from time to time, and all the kids are making that same growth. Because if it's typical, then every kid makes that. Our students need to make more in order to close that achievement gap. And so there is still that correlation. And if you looked at our MAP achievement, it's similar to our MCAS achievement, and our MAP growth is similar to our MCAS growth. What we need to do is have higher growth so that we close that achievement gap. Did that clarify for you?
Somewhat. Okay. It's helpful, but I know it's nuanced. So
yeah, we can dig in more. But basically, what I've said to schools on the MAP data, our students need to be scoring at about the 60th percentile to be considered mastering of that grade level subject. Most of our averages are around the 30 to 40 percentile. So we're talking to them about, okay, how do we, again, strategically move students those achievement levels? If we get higher achievement, we're going to get higher growth.
Okay, and so let's say that we were able to take our MAP percentile, take it from the 30, 40th, which we're currently performing at, go to the 60th percentile. Mm-hmm. Would then you see that translate in MCAS and achievement?
That is what I believe will be true, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
The other big area that's on also our accountability is progress towards attaining English proficiency for our ELs. So this is for students who are in grades 1 through 8 on the left, and then our high school. We've seen a decrease over the last 2 years in meeting those targets. However, I think that one of the things that we're looking at is who are those students that are most likely to make those gains. We have a lot of our students who are maybe in their 6th, 7th, or 8th year. So they may have started with us in kindergarten. They remain an English learner. And what happens is if I'm in my 6th year, even if I'm scoring on Access, let's say I'm scoring a 2, my target is a 4.2, because that's what the state says. After 6 years, every kid should be at a 4.2, which is the target to be exited out of English language learner subgroup. Whereas if I'm in my 2nd year and I score a 2, my target is more like a 2.5. So what we're finding is we need to really target and look at who are those students that are in our second, third, fourth year in the district and moving them. And then how do we support those students who have been here longer that have a much bigger target to get to? And that's what I think you see at the high school a lot, why those numbers are much lower for them. Questions before I move on to the last one? I know we're getting into the late evening here. So then they also look at culture of what we're going to call academic progress. So this is where it includes a survey from family members. There's a question, college readiness, and that is how many students are taking advanced placement courses or advanced academic courses. Acquisition of our 21st century skills, the DESE is defining that as taking computer science classes, and then what's the equitable access to supports. And so when we look at these, the school culture, family, student survey, the parents are asked if they feel a sense of belonging within their child's school community. We met the goal both years on this, and 96% of our parents last school year reported that they felt a sense of belonging, up from 86% or 88% the previous year. So that's a good news. Our parents are, as the superintendent mentioned, our parents are coming to meetings. Our parents are feeling like they are welcome in the schools. The students were asked if they feel that they're challenged in school and that the teachers expect them to do their best work. Our baseline was 70%, and that remained at 70%. The state set us that target for 77%. I'm not sure what that target was based on, but that's something that, is for us to look at and to have conversations with students about what do they identify, how do they define challenged? What do they think of that when we ask that question? Are students taking digital literacy and computer science classes in middle school and then in high school are what they consider those 21st century? We had, again, at the middle school level, we just missed our target. The target was 52.6%. We were at 52% of students who are taking those courses. At the high school level, it was 21.8%, and we were at 20.6%. So again, slightly below there. And so something for us to continue to look at and talk about what do we have for opportunities for our middle and high school students to take those courses. Our students completing advanced coursework, we were again in the not meeting that for 2 years. We have, at this point, 74% of our students, which honestly, I would say is very high. And so again, that target is based on where we were at, but if I think you look at the state, and we talked about this in the accountability data, at the state level, that 74% is right within where most districts or a lot of districts are in terms of offering students those advanced coursework. And then we were meeting for our equitable access, which is our SQR indicator 11. So we get to bring the SQR back into this as well. And our target was 40% of schools earning that proficiency on indicator 11, and we got to 55%. So we're well above. What that means, though, is that for this year, our target is going to be set much higher because it's going to be based on that 55% of that. And how was that for quick questions?
Couple of questions. On the ESL student data, where we're seeing that we're declining, do we desegregate the data based on like newcomer student versus students who have been in the school district for some time?
Yes. So newcomers are not included in that because you have to have 2 years of access.
Okay. And then, I liked the point you showed some data, and I know we have to go through it quickly on whether students feel like they're being challenged. 2 questions. when we look at our teacher demographics, which Glennie's demonstrated to us, right? We're lacking teachers of color, and that may relate to bilingual teachers. How do we ensure that we have enough bilingual teachers to support our ESL needs? Or is it done by paraprofessionals?
I can let the superintendent answer that, but I know the ML department is working on making sure that we first have those positions filled with licensed, qualified teachers. If we don't, they do a phenomenal job of professional development for staff to make sure that we are incorporating all of those strategies to ensure that our EL students are being serviced and provided that instruction.
What percentage of our population is in English language learners?
Are we at like, I want to say, oh, I better not.
There's 7,100 students that are identified that are required to take access. So that would be our multilingual population.
I was thinking,
What percentage?
like around 43%.
And then 2,900 special ed. Okay, so probably 50% of our student population is either MLs or special education.
And would you say, Ralph, that we have the both teaching and paraprofessional percentages needed to meet those needs?
Absolutely not. However, this is part of the process that we're looking at. That's why Glennie's work is so important and promising. Because we have such a large population of multilingual students, all teachers that teach core subjects are required to have an SEI endorsement, Sheltered English Immersion, which is the strategies for teaching students of limited English speaking capability, and we ensure that it's incorporated into their lesson plans. Thirdly, one of the things and the strategies that I will hopefully implement for next year is to provide incentives through the teacher's contract to get a second certification. So teachers, because they already have an SEI endorsement, they just need to meet minimum requirements to become an ESL teacher. And my intention is to invite regular education teachers to become expert English as a second language teachers by putting money on the table if I was to activate that second certification that they have. These strategies, when you put them all together, helps close that gap that you're so keen on making sure that we have the right type of teacher teaching those students of ours that desperately need that type of expertise and support.
That's helpful. And sorry, and this is just the more I know, the more I can do my job as an LAE board member. So we currently have students in the Lawrence Public Schools who are English language learners who will sit through the majority of their day listening to instruction in English, but not fully understanding that instruction.
I didn't say that. So that's where the work of our paraprofessionals come in. And we make sure that all students are receiving their language support. And if there isn't a certified ML teacher there, there's a regular education certified teacher there, but then we utilize our bilingual paraprofessionals to deliver the curriculum for Sheltered English.
That sounds great. And then one question, this may be a dumb question. Is there a way that when you look at the data and you look at the fact that we have 43% of our students are English language learners? I was an English language learner, so like this is not hypothetical to me. Could that population be impacting our MAP and our MCAS scores and the fact that we're not fully equipped to provide them, those wraparound services they need? Or do we think the data says something else?
You're right, it impacts it. And it's because our limited English students are required to take the MCAS, and the MCAS are in English. So if you don't have a ML student that has reached the level of 6 to be exited from from English language learner classes. And even if they are, as you well know, as a second language learner, you don't have the same level of academic skills as your mainstream students. They definitely impact our test scores through the MCAS and also our MAP scores, because our MAP tests are also in English, okay? So it is having an impact on our test scores. An interesting concept would be if we disaggregate our ML students and our special ed students and then look at what those norms are.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Or if we got the state to just make the MCAS bilingual.
Or eliminate them altogether.
Yeah.
Okay.
One final question. I thought your data point on whether students felt challenged was interesting. And again, this goes to recruitment, Glenny's, hiring people that believe in our students. And I actually think it's a point that's taken for granted. Like, I don't remember the majority of anything I learned in school, but I remember how teachers made me feel, which is really odd. And I remember how teachers made me feel like I was less than or that I couldn't achieve. Is there anything we could do in seeing that data to make sure that with the current teacher workforce we have, they understand the implications of their projections on our students?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is data we do share with staff, and we have that expectation. And I know the superintendent in his learning walks has also come back and said, you know, it's okay for the students to feel a little bit frustrated. It's okay for them to feel like they're cognitively struggling with the task. We don't always have to jump in and save them. Let them struggle, let them do it. And so I think that is something, sharing that data. It is part of when we go through and we, as Dr. Perry spoke about, when we went through and looked at the designation stuff, that is one of there are some student questions on there that we look at that is also shared back with the schools.
That's what we refer to as rigor within the lesson plan, of not making it harder, but making it more in-depth, of tapping into their cognitive skills. And it's okay for them to make mistakes, and it's okay for them to get wrong answers. It's more importantly as how did you derive at that, and what were the mistakes that you made in a formula, okay? So it's important, especially when you work with children from poverty, that it's natural for us to fall susceptible because we just care as human beings for children, especially if we're in education. Instead of posing the question to the student and allowing the student to ponder, we then too quickly jump in to try to break down the question that we ask. And when we're breaking it down, we're really making it easier versus allowing and introducing that new vocabulary and giving examples of what that vocabulary word means. So those are the types of conversations that we're having, especially through professional development. And that's why it's so important as we now roll out the new rubrics for teachers, is to make sure that they're culturally sensitive and they're mastering diversity within their classroom, so that we can make sure that kids understand that it is challenging for them, but we do rightfully care about their education and their needs. So it would be interesting. I haven't seen yet, Juana, what that survey looks like for our kids to fill out. It would be interesting for us to look at that and see if they really understand what they're answering.
Thank you.
I have okay, so Massachusetts decided, right, the voters, not to include MCAS anymore, right?
As graduation, for graduation requirements.
For graduation.
We're still gonna provide the test, but we use it for assessment.
Okay, because it is a benchmark to.
Absolutely.
And it's still used for our accountability system.
Yes, that hasn't gone away.
All right.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Kateris. Appreciate it. I appreciate the questions by the board. I know it's a little bit late, Madam Chair. Last item on the agenda, obviously, is my report for this month. And in going over the report, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I want to make sure that everybody has a wonderful holiday season and a prosperous new year, that they're safe, that they're able to do things with family, and to be able to get some rest, because we got a lot of work ahead of us. As we enter the holiday season, I think what's best, if I reclaim what has happened since July, in visiting all of our schools, they're safe, they're clean, they're healthy, and they're steady. If you go in there, you see that our kids are actively engaged. They love being in school. Our teachers are happy because they feel safe, because they feel supported, and because we also have provided a healthy environment for them. We have structures and we have routines. And the best way that I can tell you, the way you interpret that, is that no longer do you see in Lawrence Public Schools the fights that are in the newspapers, the screaming sirens around, kids having to be escorted out by police officers. We've been able to create an environment that's conducive to learning for our kids. And that being said, probably the greatest accomplishment that we've had is our enrichment programs that we have. Some of them that you see there, the talents and the skills that our kids have shown. In the last month, our award-winning Performing Arts Center, the kids performed in the Heights. And if you didn't get a chance to see it, that's too bad. I will give you a chance to see it. You're just going to have to take a trip to Florida in April when they're going to compete. Not to mention, you know, we also have academically gifted kids. We have the National Honor Society. There's some of our students and family that they were inducted and recognized. And obviously, we were present at Fenway Park, and we had a lot of families that came and supported our kids when we played the Thanksgiving game down at Fenway Park. And we had representation from our delegation, we had representation from our city council, and we even had representation from the mayor's staff to support our students and families. Speaking of the mayor, he brought in the holiday season, and 34 of our Weatherby students came down to the North Common, and they sang. The mayor invited the community, and it was well attended. And I think he kicked off the holiday season with the kids from the Weatherby School. If you notice also, we mentioned earlier our LPAC, the pictures that you see up there, that doesn't say how well attended our LPAC workshops regarding our multilingual parents are. We reached a record of over 300 parents this particular month. It's the most ever. And that, again, is attributed to the members that we have that run the LPAC. And he's always ever present here, Mr. Rodon. He's probably the greatest salesman that we've ever seen, and he sells a dream. It's called education to our families, and he's doing a tremendous, tremendous job. The South Lawrence East Elementary and other LPS schools celebrated Inclusion Week with our special ed students here in this auditorium. Our family engagement, we hosted our virtual coffee. Next slide. Just yesterday, we had over 177 participants. Wow. Okay? Yeah, they like to ask me a lot of questions. That Ms. Camposano likes to put them out there. However, why we're having such success with parent engagement is because it's not about our staff dictating to our parents. It's about informing our parents. Aside from their kids' education, we understand that there is a lot of needs in our community, and we're trying to address our students, their kids' education, through a holistic approach of making sure that our families are stable. Stability comes in all forms and shapes, whether it's food, whether it's rent, whether it's heating costs, and we provide all of those services to them through our partnerships. And it's showing a huge, huge success that the parents feel that they're meaningful. So we just finished wrapping up our last coffee hours. We continue those, and we alternate monthly. Our next slide, as we mentioned, the football game and the experience that our kids had at Fenway Park is one that they will take with them forever. And although we played a powerhouse in Central Catholic, our kids played their hearts out. And it's a great rivalry because all of you know that our kids and our Lancers have great basketball teams, and we've beaten Central Catholic. And you can hear them shouting back and forth. And Central Catholic says, we'll see you in football. And boy, did they see us in football. But I reminded the coach at Central Catholic that we make tremendous second basemen and shortstops. We don't make linebackers, correct? So it's a growing program, and I think the kids love it, and the kids love to see our staff going out to support them. Our next slide, our performing arts theater program, as we mentioned, it was a tremendous success. They're already planning and practicing for their spring performance, which is Miss Saigon. The performing arts teachers were able to incorporate one of our other partners that, if you could see there on the bottom slide, those are some wonderful devils from Miche, I believe. The last slide on the bottom, if you could see all of our kids from our National Honor Society. And by the way, that whole ceremony and the activities are ran by our students, okay? And I know Mr. Matos, our Deputy Matos, was there to help provide certificates to our families. Just yesterday, we were informed students that went and competed in the Massachusetts Educational Theater Guild contest. First place for one of our students, second place for one of our other students, honorable mentions for two other students. So when I tell you that it's not just about math and English and reading, it's also about performing. Our kids feel very honored, and the fact that they bring with them skills and talents that if we didn't have the type of enrichment programs that we have, we would never know, and we would never be able to cultivate the opportunities that they have within the arts and other extracurricular activities. Last but not least, on your last slide, once a month on Saturday, our food service department provides a tremendous opportunity for providing food for our families, and all they have to be is just be a parent of our students. Each month, we have grown more and more. We're up to 448 families and 929 students. So we send out that information to families. Ms. Noon, through the Boston Market, brings trucks of food, and they provide tremendous opportunities for our family. So, and it's sponsored by our teachers union. They come in and they chip in, and we all are there greeting our families and providing nutritious food for them to take home. So I'm happy, I'm honored, and I feel confident that the work that we have ahead will be paid off at the end of this next school year. So I appreciate the opportunity for allowing me to provide our update of what has happened over the course of the last month.
Thank you. Great report, and congratulations, too.
I have no order of business this evening, Madam Chair.
All right. Any other business? Any other questions?
Thank you, everyone who presented. Very great presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
So, yes, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Seconded.
Maria, would you please call the vote?
Dr. Dolores Calaf,
Yes.
Juana Matias,
Yes.
Chair Maria Muller,
Yes.
Mayor Brian De Peña.
Yes.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you, everyone.
Peaceful break, everyone. Thank you.